do you have left? I don't know, maybe 10. Me too. The first few zombies were coming into sight above us. The ones from the first floor were having more trouble coming up than the others were coming down, but it was just a matter of time. They would make it up eventually. I guess we make them count, I said. Yep. But save your last round for me, okay? With pleasure. A couple of zombies rounded the corner above me, and I shot them. Every shot sounded like an explosion in the tight confines of the stairwell. There's too many of them, I said. Keep shooting. I turned my attention back to the zombies coming down the stairs. Marcus was pulling on the second-floor door with everything he had. He put one foot on the door jamb and grabbed the handle with both hands. He yanked on it with his whole body weight, and the door flew open. Marcus fell backwards and landed on his butt. 2 older male zombies in very expensive suits came through the door, and in the split second before Marcus put holes in their heads, I recognized one of them as Captain Ibsen from the Media Relations Office. Marcus stepped in front of the door and kept it from closing with his foot. "Come on," he said. "It's now or never." But he didn't have to tell me twice. I was out the door and onto the second-floor reception area before he finished his sentence. The second floor was the home of the department's interagency and media relations offices, and the 10 or so zombies I saw there were all dressed in the finest style. At least they had been. And all those expensive clothes were soaked through with blood and bile. Marcus did the shooting for both of us, clearing a path through the zombies and across to the west side of the building. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Can't take the south stairwell again. There's too many of them that way." "But where are we—" "Over here," he said, and pushed open a gray metal door on the back wall. "This way." I followed him through the door and into the night air. The sign on the door said observation deck, but that was a little optimistic for the scrap of cement and metal railing that we were standing on. It was maybe 4 feet wide and 15 feet long, with a canopy overhead that didn't even cover the whole deck. There were a few ratty chairs next to the door and about 1,000,000 cigarette butts on the cement, and the only view of the observation deck provided was of the fenced-in portion of the employee parking lot and the backside of a long-since vacated bakery. "Where to now?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. "I'm making this up as I go." "That's cute." "Seriously, Marcus, where to?" "I am serious. I don't know. You got any ideas?" He tilted back one of the chairs so that it kept the door from opening, and then looked over the railing to the parking lot below. "I guess we'd jump for it." I looked over the railing and then back at him. "Are you insane? We're like 30 feet up. Gosh, Princess, I'm sorry. Did you want to go back inside and fight zombies?" "Fuck you." "Where else do you suggest we go?" He was right, of course. There wasn't any other way out of the building. I looked over the edge again and whistled. "After you," I said. "Gee, thanks. Don't mention it." Marcus climbed over the side and lowered himself down until he was hanging from the ledge by his fingertips. Then he let go. I heard him land, and a second later he called up to me to jump down. "It's all right," he said. "It only looks like a long ways." "Asshole," I said, and then climbed over the railing just like I had seen him do. I held on for a second, then let go. I knew even before I landed that I was going to mess myself up, and sure enough, when I hit, I felt a stabbing pain go through my right ankle, up my leg, and into my back. I folded and stayed that way. "You okay?" he asked me. I looked up at him and thought of Carlos Williams. "It's my ankle," I said. "Shit." He looked around, searching the parking lot for movement. "Do you think it's broken?" "No," I said hopefully. "I don't think so." "Try to move it. Turn it in little circles." I tried moving it, and it hurt like hell. Marcus helped me stand up, and I put some weight on it, a little at a time. "How does it feel?" "It hurts." "Do you think you can walk it off?" "Yeah," I said, taking a few tentative steps. I think so. Good. We turned toward the building just in time to see the back door bust open and a crowd of zombies come pouring out. We both stood there, slack-jawed at the sudden commotion. Another moment later, and they were through the back door and flooding out into the parking lot, coming right for us. Chapter 23. We stood there in the parking lot and watched as the crowd of zombies got bigger. "There are so many of them," I said. "Why are there so many of them? The first floor was empty when we came in." Marcus checked his magazine and then slapped it back into his gun. "I've only got 4 rounds left. We need to get out of here." "I know. How's your ankle?" "I can make it." He nodded and looked out over the parking lot. I could see his wheels turning. The lot was maybe a third full and surrounded on 3 sides by a 15-foot-high green wrought-iron fence. There was a guard shack and a gate at the south end of the lot, but it wouldn't open without a key card. "Looks like we're going to have to climb over," he said. Of course, that was easier said than done. Every April, during the fiesta celebrations, some drunken idiot gets stuck at the top of the fence while trying to climb over so he can piss on a cop car, and some cop has to risk his fat ass going up there to get him down. The fence did really well keeping people out, but now it was doing just as well keeping us in. I looked around for something we could climb up on to help us get over, but there was nothing close to the fence. "Looks like that's going to be kind of hard to do, Marcus." "Again," he said. "Would you rather we go back inside and fight zombies? I don't think the zombies would mind much." "One of these days I just might take you up on that." "Just follow me," he said. We started toward the west side of the parking lot. If we could get over the fence there, it was only about 20 yards to our car. But we hadn't made it more than halfway to the fence when we heard a woman screaming to the south of us. She sounded really close. We both stopped and listened. She screamed again. She was close. Marcus took off running across the lot, and I hobbled after him as fast as I could go. The zombies coming out of headquarters were spreading out, and as I looked behind me, I saw a line of them backlit by the building's emergency lights. It was hypnotic in a way, watching them. They moved so slowly, so painfully, and yet with such a relentless need to put their hands on us that I found it hard to look away. The girl's screaming brought my attention away from the zombies. I watched Marcus disappear at the edge of the lot, and I was still maybe 30 yards away from him when I heard him fire the first shot. I got to him as fast as I could. He was standing at the fence, facing a young girl of about 16 who was on the other side. She was screaming for help and reaching between the bars to grab hold of Marcus's clothes. Behind her was the body of the man Marcus had just shot. More zombies were lumbering toward us from the bakery behind the girl.
"Open the gate," she said. "Please, let me in. Please."
Her face was wet with tears and sweat. When I looked into her eyes, I immediately recognized that look that said there was nothing anybody could do to reach her. She was only seeing fear. Marcus fired again, but even in the low light of the alleyway, I could tell there were more of them than we had bullets. They were thick in the darkness behind her, and there were more entering the alley farther off. She turned her hunted gaze on me.
"Open the gate. Please, you've got to let me in."
I opened my mouth to speak, but all that came out was a pantomime of words. "I can't." "Run," Marcus said to her. "Run, we can't open the gates." But she was so scared she couldn't take that in. The words weren't breaking through her wall. She pounded the wrought iron bars so hard they rocked inside their concrete mounts. She cried to be saved. Marcus fired again, and out of the corner of my eye I saw his slide lock back. "I'm empty," he said. "I got it," I said, and came up next to him, firing what I had left. I fired 3 times, and each time I put one of them on the ground, but all I did was make room for other hands to reach for her. We had nothing left to protect her with.
"Help me. Jesus, why won't you help me?"
"Run," Marcus said to her. "Come on, run."
"Please."
She said it over and over again until she just gave up and slid down the bars to the ground. She wasn't listening to anything anymore. "Run!" The girl turned her huge doe eyes up at Marcus. He knelt down next to her and showed her his gun. "Do you see that? Do you? When it does that, it means I'm out of bullets. We can't open the gate. We don't have the key. If you want to live, you have to stand up and run. Run! That way!" Marcus tried to grab the sides of her face through the bars. "You have to run," he said, lowering his voice and speaking as calmly as he could. "Run!" He tried to pull her up, but she slipped out of his hands and collapsed to the ground. "Run, you stupid bitch! Get your ass up and run! Right now!" But the zombies closed in around her. We were less than a yard away from her, and we were powerless to do anything to help her. As I watched, the color bled out of her face and she stopped struggling. Her screams were muffled into silence. When the zombies had finished with her, some of them stood up and clutched at me through the fence with their bloody hands. "Fuck this," I heard Marcus say from behind me, but I didn't turn to look at him until I heard the roar of an engine. It was Marcus, behind the wheel of one of the gang unit cars. I saw the headlights come up, and then the back tires began to spin as Marcus backed it up. "What the hell are you doing, Marcus?" He skidded the car to a stop halfway across the lot, paused there for just a moment, and then the car lurched forward. He was barreling down on the spot where I was standing. "Marcus," I said, "you are one insane son of a bitch." I jumped to one side just before he reached me. He never hit the brakes or slowed down at all. The car blasted through the gate in a splash of sparks and broken metal. Some of the zombies at the gate were thrown clear by the impact. Others were mowed down under the car. The Crown Victoria went all the way across the alley and smashed to a stop in a crumpled mess against the wall of the bakery. Chapter 24. Marcus was stuck in the car, jammed up beneath the steering wheel and the airbag. I held the airbag off him like a drape. He turned towards me. There was a little bit of blood on his face and a musty-smelling white cloud inside the car that made me feel like I was inhaling ash. "Hey, Marcus, can you hear me?" He let out a shallow, tired sigh and opened his eyes very slowly. "Oh, man," he said, and a thin grin crossed his face. "That sucked." I smiled, too. I couldn't help it. "You're a fucking idiot, you know that? You'd think I'd have figured that out by now, wouldn't you? Can you move?" "No." "You can't? What's wrong?" "You're in the way. You're killing me, Marcus, you know that?" "Not yet," he said, chuckling as he pushed his way out of the car. "But I'm working on it." The smile didn't last long, though. After I helped him out of the car, he looked at the scene, at the bodies, at the girl whose torso had been ripped open and mostly eaten. What was she thinking? Why didn't she run like I told her to? The force of the impact had thrown her body several yards to the right of us. She had been wearing a pair of blue jeans and a soft baby blue camisole, but the camisole was shredded now, and the jeans soaked with her blood. From the neck up, she looked human. From the waist down, too. The part in between looked like the floor of a butcher's shop. Even Marcus had a hard time looking at it. "I don't know," I said. "Just scared, I guess." He shook his head. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever seen anybody do. Why would anybody just lie down and die like that? She just gave up." "It's a waste, that's for sure." Marcus and I hobbled away. Neither of us were able to make a very good pace. My ankle was still hurting, though not nearly as badly as it had been just before Marcus nearly ran me over, and Marcus was banged up something fierce. He said his whole right side felt like it had been hit by a wrecking ball. A lot of the zombies from the alley were still moving, but they couldn't catch up with us. The ones from headquarters were still inside the parking lot, stuck behind the fence and not much of a threat. We dodged a small group that was outside the fence at the northwest corner, and then had a clear shot all the way to the car. Both of us went for the driver's seat. "I'm driving," he said. "Yeah, right. Not after what you just did." "I called it back at the gas station, remember?" "What does this look like, 3rd grade? Plus, I let you drive from the ready lot to here. It's my turn now." "I'm driving." "No way, you're hurt." "So are you." "We're going to my house," I said. "I know the way." "Fine," I said, and threw up my hands. "But we're going to my house. Straight there. Nowhere else." "I know. Get in." Marcus pulled the car off the sidewalk, and we turned north on Vespers. We were going to take Vespers northbound all the way through downtown because it joined up with the access road for the freeway, and we should have been able to take that all the way out to my house. Provided we drove outbound on the inbound lanes to avoid all the traffic, it was less than 20 minutes from headquarters to my house. But we didn't even make it 3 blocks before we were stopped by massive traffic congestion at the emergency entrance to Children's Hospital. Everything was shut down to the north and to the west of that by debris and abandoned cars. Marcus turned the car onto the sidewalk again and drove us east. "Maybe we can cut through Washington Square and double back." "Yeah," I said as I watched a group of zombies walking across the street from the hospital. "Let's try that." While he drove up the sidewalk, I went to work on the remaining ammunition, splitting it up between his gun and mine. 20 for each of us, I said, and handed him back his pistol and his extra magazine. "Is that it?" "That's it." "Really? I thought we had a whole—" He slammed on the brakes hard. "Holy shit! Oh my God!" My jaw went slack, and I sat there gaping at a crowd so big I couldn't see the end of it. To the north of us and again to the west, the streets were filled with zombies. Cars in the middle of the street looked like rocks in the middle of a fast-moving stream. The bus station on the northeast corner was on fire, and the windows of the glass buildings above us were painted with fire. Large pieces of rubble filled the streets, and through the charred frame of an exploded bus we could see where the gas pumps had once been. The fire was still at a healthy rage, and in the orange and yellow glow I watched the infected coming for us. "Where are they all coming from? Look at that, Marcus. They're everywhere." Marcus spun the car around under full acceleration and left a pair of black looping streaks down the sidewalk as we headed south. He took us down 2 blocks and then turned east again, where we hit more abandoned cars and more crowds. It was maddening, like trying to find our way out of a maze, only the game was rigged so that every direction was a dead end. We couldn't stay on any one road longer than a block or 2 before having to change direction and start all over again. By the time we cleared downtown, we were on the near east side and caught between traffic and another crowd of zombies. I looked from one obstacle to the other, my mind racing for an idea of what to do next. Marcus chose a third option. He turned the car onto a pedestrian walkway that led over the freeway and came down in the park-and-ride terminal for the convention center. "Hold on," he told me as we started down 2 flights of steps. I saw the ground ahead of us drop away into empty space, and then all of a sudden we were pointed straight down and the ground was rushing up to meet us. We hit so hard I could actually hear the car's frame bending. Marcus struggled with the wheel, caught the car before it could drift all the way sideways, and then landed it in the middle of Mount Olive Street. He let the car drift to a stop and waited for me to say something. "What?" "Well?" he asked. "Well, what?" "Go on. Say the words. That was some of the best driving you've ever seen, wasn't it?" "Are you kidding me?" There were pieces of broken windshield glass in my hair, and my door wouldn't close anymore. "Marcus, that was the most fucked-up thing I have seen you do all night. I never did anything like that when I was driving. Oh, come on. I was still brushing glass out of my hair. I held one up so he could see it. What did I do that was worse than this? You're kidding, right? Eddie, look in the back seat. Do you see a dead fat guy back there? No, you don't. And you know why there's not a dead fat guy back there? Because what I just did was some incredible fucking driving. Tell me it wasn't. Go on. Tell me and then call yourself a liar. No. Admit it. I laughed at him. No. No way. Fine. He put the car in gear and started off down Mount Olive, pouting the whole way. He amazed me like that. It cracked me up that someone capable of kicking as much ass as he did could still be capable of pouting like a 4-year-old when he didn't get his way. But there it was. The car was so messed up, the best he could get out of it was about 30 miles per hour. But he still threw in a parting shot before he gave up the argument. I don't care what you say. That was some incredible driving, and you know it. Mount Olive curved around the east side of the convention center, then went north until it turned into the on-ramp for the highway. We weren't able to make it that far, though. There was a massive amount of traffic congestion before the ramp, and it was completely impassable. We didn't even have room to drive up the grass embankment because there were so many cars wedged into the gaps between the guardrails. We had to back up and cross over a Dove Street into the East Division service area. Neither one of us had ever worked the east side, so everything east of Mount Olive was uncharted territory for us. I had heard the neighborhoods east of the convention center were tough, but I was shocked to see how different they were from the perfectly manicured gardens and clean streets of the convention center's grounds. We were just 1 block over, separated from the center by a long line of enormous live oaks, yet it seemed like we had stepped into another world. Even the pavement was different. Where the convention center's streets were smooth and accented with russet and ochre-colored bricks, we were on raw asphalt that had buckled from the railroad tracks that had crisscrossed all the streets in the area. The lingering, filthy stench of backed-up sewage and rotting garbage hung in the air. After turning onto Dove, we were lost. Streets that seemed like they should have gone north-south seemed to fade away into vacant lots or curve back on themselves, and we suddenly found ourselves in the warehouse district, with absolutely no idea how we got there or how we would get out. The buildings we passed were dying. Graffiti covered the faces of the buildings in unbelievable profusion. In places, the long, unintelligible scrawls were covered up by weeds growing at the base of the foundation. It didn't really make sense to call what we were looking at the warehouse district, because there was really nothing more to it than one decaying hulk after another stretching on into the darkness. What I was looking at was the dead city, the cancerous growth in the bowels of a dying culture. I was thinking that way, about the death of things, and staring out the window at the gaping black holes in the sides of the buildings we passed, when Marcus slapped me on the arm. "What's that?" he asked, pointing a good ways down the road at what looked to me to be smoke. But it wasn't smoke. Even from a distance I knew it wasn't smoke. It was moving faster than smoke, but thicker and blacker. "It looks like a flock of birds." "You might be right," he said. "Probably grackles." They were grackles. It was the biggest flock of birds I've ever seen. As we pulled up on another dead end, we saw hundreds of thousands of fat black birds sitting on every available perch. They lined the edge of the roof of the building straight ahead of us, and they were all over the power lines and the parking lot and the gutted carcass of a Country Fields Bread Company 18-wheeler. Red and white plastic bread bags fluttered into the air all around us. The grackles were tearing the loaves of bread apart, feeding like sharks in an ocean of blood. The noise they made was tremendous. We saw movement again. From off to our left, a small section of the flock fluttered into the air, flew a short distance, and then settled down to the ground again. "Look at that," Marcus said. His voice had a strange, exhausted breathlessness to it that I hadn't heard before. Then I saw why the birds were taking off. There were zombies moving through the parking lot. At first I saw just a few, but as I watched, more zombies streamed out from between the buildings. Soon we were facing a crowd of maybe 60 or more. A few of the grackles started screaming, and soon the whole flock was agitated and squawking like they were being murdered, though the birds didn't have any trouble avoiding the infected. Small sections of the flock took to the wing in violent fits and then settled down again a short distance away. "We should go." "Yeah," said Marcus. "I think so, too." He put the car in reverse and turned his head to look behind us. He frowned and then dropped his head and cursed under his breath. "What is it?" I looked back in my rearview mirror and saw what he was looking at. There was a huge crowd of zombies behind us. "Crap! Where do they keep coming from?" "I don't know," he said. "They're everywhere." He put the car in drive again and peeled off to the left. He cut between two long white buildings and sped down a broken, puddle-filled alley. We broke out of the alley at Shiloh, and he stopped the car. Shiloh was blocked off to the west of us by a gutted fire truck. All of its hoses were laid out next to the smoldering black corner of a vacant warehouse. Either something had exploded or a section of the building had come crashing down because there was debris all over the road, and there was no way we could get around it. More crowds were gathering to the right of us. Big crowds stretched out deep into the darkness. Marcus turned the car into the crowd and punched it. I leaned back in my seat, bracing myself against the dashboard. But before I could yell at him not to do it, we were diving headfirst into the crowd. We hit the first bodies while we were still accelerating, and then everything started happening too fast. There was a hideous rush of wet thuds as bodies hit metal and glass and rolled off the hood. I saw faces, but no features. Everything was a blur, and roaring above it all was the straining engine of the Crown Victoria, fighting a losing battle as it pushed through the crowd. We started to drift to my side of the street. The car was rolling sideways by the combined weight of all the human bodies it was striking, like a boat caught in a strong cross-current. I could feel the car start to lose acceleration, almost as if it had been knocked out of gear. Marcus had it floored, but we were slowing down, and we were still caught up in the thick of the crowd. We were an island in a sea of bodies when the car gave out altogether. "Run for it," Marcus said as he opened his door and took off toward a 3-story gray and white building to his left. But I couldn't get out. Already there were dozens of zombies pushing up against my side of the car, and it was all I could do to hold the door closed. If there hadn't been so many of them pressing against the ones closest to me, they would have been able to rip the door out of my hands. Frantically, I climbed over the computer between the two bucket seats and squeezed out of the driver's side door. Even as I was climbing out of the car, more bodies were pressing down on me. I felt a hand clutching at my shoulder and my neck, and then they were all over me. I started swinging my fists at everything. As they swarmed around me, I felt their weight pushing me back into the car. I put one arm across the top of the door and the other on the broken windshield. Before they could come down on top of me, I jumped straight up and got on top of the car. From the roof I could see Marcus fighting his own way toward the building. I also saw a way to get to him. I pulled my gun and shot at 4 zombies standing in front of the car, and then jumped to the ground and ran after Marcus, dodging zombies as I ate up the distance between us. He was fighting them back from the doorway, yelling at me to hurry it up. I saw him break a man's neck and then throw himself into a thick wooden door, ramming it with his shoulder. I came up right behind him and never slowed down. We hit the door at the same time and sent it flying off its hinges. We both crashed to the ground on the other side in a wave of dust and shattered wood. I popped up and turned my gun back on the doorway. Zombies were already coming through. Marcus was running toward a large staircase off to the right. I fired at the first zombie through the door and was about to fire again when I heard Marcus shout, "Come on! Up here!" I ran after him. He went up the staircase and around a corner at the top of the stairs with me on his heels the whole way. There we slipped into a deserted office, and I slammed the door behind us. "Help me move this," he said, pushing a cabinet in front of the door. Together we pushed it flush to the door, and then listened. We could hear heavy, plodding steps making their way up the stairs. Chapter 25. I turned away from the door and the sound of the infected beyond it, breathing hard and shivering against the cold. The building we had taken shelter in had started to rot after years of neglect. There were holes in the wall, and most of the windows were broken out. A harsh, cold breeze bit through its dark cavities. It was like being in a cave. I instinctively reached down to my gun belt for my flashlight, but it was long gone. We were stuck in the viewless dark. Gradually my eyes became accustomed to it, and bulking shapes around us turned into the less obscure outlines of very old and very musty office furniture. The ravages of neglect were everywhere, and the place stank of wet, rotten wood. A wet, gritty sort of sawdust covered everything. Marcus wiped some of it from his hands and asked, "Where's the shotgun?" "Oh, crap. I think it's still in the car," I said. "Why is it in the car?" His sense of humor never failed him. "I don't know. I guess we forgot it." "We? You were supposed to get it." "Me? Why me?" "You were riding shotgun. That's what that phrase means. You ride shotgun, you're the one who's supposed to hold on to the shotgun." "You don't really want to argue about this, do you? Because you know I'm not the one who just took off running and left his partner's ass hanging out in the wind. I'm real sorry if I forgot it, but I was kind of busy. You know, with those zombies trying to eat me and all." "You don't do sarcasm very well at all." "Was I being sarcastic? Because I didn't mean to be. I was being dead fucking serious. What the hell is wrong with you? You just left me out there." "You're a big boy," he said. "You didn't need my help. You may not be able to shoot worth a damn, but you can fight when you need to. I've seen you do it. And I wouldn't let you watch my back if I didn't know you were up for doing it again. It would have been nice if you'd have remembered the shotgun, though." Something crashed against the door. Both of us jumped back, ready for those things to come busting into the room. The door shook, but it held. That first loud crash gave way to a slow, steady beating against the door, and even in the faint light I could see little streams of white dust sparkling down from the seams of the door. At first it sounded like there was just one or maybe two of them on the other side, but gradually the noise grew louder and less rhythmic. Soon there were dozens of hands beating against the door, and the door was moving, creaking back and forth in the hinges. "I guess we argue about it another time," Marcus said. "Where do they keep coming from?" "I don't know, but we should probably get going." "I mean it, Marcus. Where do they keep coming from? First the street's deserted, and then the next thing you know the whole damn place is covered in them. They don't move that fast. How does this keep happening? What are we doing to attract them?" "What do I look like?" he said. "Do I look like I have the first fucking idea about what is going on?" "It's weird." "No shit. Tell me it didn't take you all night long to figure that out." "No," I said. "Okay then. We can't stay here." "Where to?" "Anywhere but here." He walked to the back of the room and disappeared around a corner. "Come on," he said. "There's a hallway back here. Let's see where it goes." For Marcus, there was no stopping and questioning what he was doing or what he was about to step into. He was tough, and he knew it. It never occurred to him that he couldn't stand toe-to-toe with anything or anyone he encountered. But I wasn't that way. For me, rushing headlong into a fight was just plain stupid. I only fought when I had to, and even then I tried to have a plan about it. They say opposites attract, though. Maybe that was why Marcus and I worked so well together. We counteracted the worst in each other. As I followed him into the hallway, I was still troubled by the way so many zombies always seemed to descend on us so quickly everywhere we went. It seemed impossible that death could have overtaken so many so quickly. I thought about the crowds we had encountered, and I wondered if it was just our stupid luck, or if there was something more to it than that. I wondered what Ken would have said about it. For Marcus, it wasn't even an issue. He seemed to think it just happened, that it was completely random, and that we just happened to fall into the thick of it because we were unlucky. "More the fuckers to shoot," was all he said about it. Behind us, I heard the sound of the door giving way, and the filing cabinet being thrown to the ground. It was a sudden, hollow sound that reverberated through the building. "Sounds like we're going to have some company," Marcus said. "Yeah, better keep going." The hallway we were in connected to a whole series of small offices. They were more or less interconnected, and the walls between them were little more than particle-board partitions that didn't completely separate one cubicle from another. Once we were past the offices, we stepped into another hallway that was much narrower. There were doorways on each side that were more substantial, and I guessed that they had belonged to the people who ran this place. But there must have been another way in besides the one we took, because as soon as we stepped into the hallway, 2 zombies came out from around a corner to our left. I stepped over and pushed the one in front into the arms of the other one, and they both fell to the ground. I took out my pistol, but before I could fire, Marcus stopped me. "Don't waste your bullets," he said. "Let's keep moving." We took off at a trot, winding around a couple of corners before we slowed to a walk again. The floorboards creaked under our feet, which wasn't good. We were bringing unwanted attention to ourselves with every step. Suddenly Marcus stopped, held his hand up, and listened to the darkness ahead of us. I stopped too and listened. Footsteps. They were coming closer, too. Marcus looked back at me, and I nodded back. "Can you tell how many?" I asked him. He shook his head. "More than one," he said. "Okay, I'm ready when you are." He rose from his crouch and moved out around the corner. Then he stopped and let out a frustrated sigh. I stepped around the corner to see what he was looking at, and when I saw it, I gasped. The hallway opened up to a landing, and beyond that was a wide staircase that led out to a row of truck bays. One of the overhead doors had collapsed, and a huge crowd of zombies was pouring in through the hole. A narrow stripe of blue moonlight ran crossways through the room below, and a small group was crossing it and mounting the stairs. They had already seen us. I could only see a short distance beyond the door where they were coming in, but the little bit of the alley that I could see was packed in tight with bodies. From the rate they were pouring into the building, I guessed that the first floor was already overrun. "There are so many of them," I said. "This is getting old real quick," Marcus answered. "We can't stay here. Let's double back and see if we can get around them." "Right behind you." We both backed away from the landing. I could hear more of them coming up the stairs, and while they didn't seem to climb very well, it was only a matter of time before there'd be enough of them to cause us problems. We ran into a dark hallway off to our right because it looked like it went all the way back to the far side of the building. We made it maybe 50 or 60 feet when we heard the floorboards creaking in front of us. Marcus stopped and knelt down, listening, trying to figure out their direction from the sound. "We're surrounded," I said. "Start trying doors," Marcus suggested, his voice a barely audible whisper in the darkness. When I found a door, I told Marcus to stop so I could check it. I found the knob, cold and gritty with dust, and tried it. It was frail, but the lock held. "See if you can force it," Marcus whispered. I tried putting pressure on it, and the door felt loose on its hinges, but it wouldn't open. "It'll make too much noise," I whispered back. "Okay," he said. "Keep moving. Maybe one of these doors will—" I couldn't see what made him stop talking, but I felt him move violently away from the wall, and I heard him struggling with one of those things. "Get that door open," he said, and even as he said it, he ran at me and pushed me forward against the door. I lost my balance. Marcus didn't wait for me, though. He hit the door with his shoulder, knocking it down. Both of us went sprawling through the doorway and landed on a pile of broken wooden slats. There was just enough light to see the shape of the room. The whole left side wall had been knocked out and gave us a view of the first floor. The smallest hint of moonlight made it through the windows along the west wall of the warehouse, but it was enough for us to see that the first floor was a seething mass of zombies. Straight ahead of us, the wall only went part of the way up to the ceiling. The top half was broken away, exposing a wide, flat crawl space that stretched all the way across to the other side of the building. "Through there," Marcus said, pointing at the crawl space. The crawl space had just enough room for us to go through on our hands and knees, and it looked pretty unstable. But even as I stood there thinking about it, Marcus was shooting at zombies in the hallway. "Go," he said. "Hurry it up." He fired again, and that got me moving. I climbed into the crawl space and started moving across the boards. The floor was uneven, and it felt weak. I could feel it give a little as I put all my weight on it. Raised wooden slats crisscrossed the floor and made going forward difficult. Each time I came to one, I had to steady myself on it and swing my legs over one at a time so that I could put my weight down slowly on the other side. "Here they come," Marcus said, and when I turned to look back at him, I saw zombies climbing into the crawl space. "Be careful," I said. "The floor feels weak here." I was just over halfway across when I heard Marcus fire a shot. The hollow space made it sound like an explosion. I turned back and saw him on his back, firing his gun through his knees. "Marcus!" He rolled his head over so he could face me. "What?" "Cut it out. Just get across. There are only 3 of them. We get them and we don't have to rush. Don't be an idiot. Just come on." I couldn't see his face clearly, but I know what kind of look he was giving me. He rolled over onto his stomach and propped himself up, and then we both heard the floor crack. "Marcus," I said, but before I could say anything else, there was a loud popping noise, like an ice skin cracking. I felt the floor move. I saw him look down at the floor beneath him, and then the whole thing gave way. He disappeared through the floor in a rush of snapping wood and flailing arms. "Marcus," I said, and rushed towards the spot where he had just been. There was a gaping hole in the floor, and I crawled right up to the edge and looked down. Marcus had landed on his back on top of a huge mound of rotten wood, and all around him was a narrowing ring of zombies moving in to claim him. "Marcus!" Even as I yelled it, I was firing down onto the heads of the zombies nearest him. "Get up," I said. "Move, damn it! Move!" And I fired and fired and fired until the slide locked back. But Marcus never moved. I saw him roll his head to one side and try to sit up, but in a moment they were on him. He kicked at them and tried to push them away, but they weighed down on top of him and tore into his body with their hands and teeth. "Get out of here," he said to me, his voice breaking with the pain. "Go! Get out of here! Don't waste your bullets!" I screamed for him to move, but it was wasted breath. All I could do was watch as he died in that gurgling, violent mass of bodies. A little stream of white dust sifted down from my fingertips onto the scene like the barest hint of snow. I closed my eyes. The floor creaked again, and my eyes shot open. The zombies Marcus had shot at were still crawling towards me. I pointed my gun at them and pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. The slide was still locked back, and the chamber was empty. The trigger wouldn't fall. I screamed at them to stop, but of course they wouldn't. And then I heard the floor pop again. There was another pop and another, and the floor shifted under me. It took my breath away. "Oh, shit, oh, shit, oh, shit!" I looked up at the zombies in pure, unadulterated panic, like I expected to see some sort of echo of my own fear in theirs. But they were oblivious. They kept coming. "No," I said, pleading with them. "Stop! Stop!" But there was no use saying anything at all. It was like talking to a wall. They crawled on, and nothing would have turned them back. They didn't notice the floor beneath them. I was the only thing they saw. I inched my way backward on my elbows, crawling away on my belly at first, and then on my hands and knees as I got farther away from the hole. Every time the floor popped and cracked, I felt another wave of panic wash over me. There was a wooden slat on either side of me, and I held on to them, using them to pull myself along. Putting one hand over the next kept me focused on movement, and helped me think about not falling through the floor. And then I did fall through. The wood beneath me didn't even pop. It was there, and then it wasn't. The next thing I knew, my feet were dangling in the air, swinging back and forth, kicking for a foothold that wasn't there. I grabbed the beams on either side of me, and squeezed my fingernails deep into the rotten wood. My grip was so tight that a sharp pain shot through my knuckles and into my wrists and arms, but I would not let go. I held on with all I had, willing myself to pull up. I heaved myself up, but couldn't get over the beams. I couldn't move. All I could do was turn my head part of the way around, just enough to see 2 of the zombies crawling towards me. I yelled at them to stop, but of course they didn't. They kept coming, and all I could do was shout. The floor lurched backwards. I felt it move and caught myself with a start. I heard the floor pop behind me, and when I turned my head, I saw one of the zombies fall through the floor. I couldn't see the others. I turned my head the other way and didn't see them there either. "Come on," I said. "Pull up! Pull up!" Very slowly and very painfully I managed to haul myself over the edge of the hole. When at last I landed on the moldy floorboards of the crawlspace, I collapsed, shaking. My friend was dead, and I had almost died. The realization hit me hard. Thinking of Marcus, I started the process of pulling myself along the boards again. I was so caught up in my grief I didn't even realize I'd reached the other side. I rolled over the edge and landed on the floor of another office, never so relieved to feel solid ground underneath me. I took in the darkness. There was a door on the opposite wall, and I figured there was another hallway beyond that. There would be more of those things waiting for me, too. I checked the door. It was locked, but from my side. I turned the thumb catch and was about to turn the knob when I heard noises on the other side. I put my head against the door and listened. I could hear the muffled shuffle of feet on plank wood beyond the door. Chapter 26. The first thing most cops do after they graduate from the police academy is go out and buy a fancy cop wallet so they can show off their badge. My department makes us carry our badge and police ID on us at all times, and the local cop stores sell special wallets to hold it all. The one I bought has a cutout on the front part for the badge, and 2 see-through panels on the inside for both halves of the ID. When Andrew was born, the hospital staff took a picture of him. In the picture, April has him across her chest, and he's holding the smallest pair of red hands up against the light. His eyes are shut tight. April hates the way she looks in it, but she had a special copy of it made for my birthday because she saw how much it meant to me. As I sat there in that decayed hole of an office, my back against the wall, I took the picture out of my wallet and stared at Andrew's red, exhausted face. His mother was so flushed with relief and love for the baby in her arms that I could see the emotion shining through her skin. Seeing the 2 of them together like that made me smile in spite of everything else I was feeling. Outside in the hallway, I could hear more of those things shuffling around, and I wondered how many of them there were, and if they could sense me somehow. It still bothered me how they always seemed to find me. I told myself if I ever saw Ken Stoller again, I would ask him that very question. That is, right after I kicked his ass for stealing that truck. One look around the room was enough to tell me that if they could sense me and manage to get through the door, I'd be screwed. I only had 6 rounds left, and nowhere to hide. I know it sounds strange, but even with the very real threat of ending up a shredded, bleeding piece of meat on the floor of some abandoned warehouse hanging over my head, the only thing I could wrap my mind around at that moment was Andrew's picture. And of all the memories I had accumulated from the 6 short months that he had been a part of my life, the one that came to mind was me feeding him a bottle at 2 in the morning, rocking him back and forth in an old glider chair until he cried himself back to sleep. I thought about all the times he'd fallen asleep on my shoulder, and I wanted more than anything else in the world to be back there, holding him, patting his back to make him burp, and feeling the warm, soft wind of his breath against my neck. In the darkness of that office, I was able to imagine myself back in that glider chair. I turned my head just slightly. I could almost see the bedroom where April and I slept. The image was part memory, part self-induced hallucination, and the moment I recognized it for what it was gone. The spell was broken. I knew right then that to stay in that room would get me killed, and there was no way in hell I was going to let that happen. More than anything, I wanted to live. I stood up and leaned my head against the door, putting my mind in order for what I was about to do. I turned the knob slowly until it clicked over. I took a deep breath and got ready to move. And that's when the cell phone on my belt started ringing. Chapter 27. I nearly jumped out of my boots. Fumbling at my belt, I grabbed the phone and flipped it open. So many things had happened in the last 2 hours, so many horrible things, that I had completely forgotten about it. The caller ID screen showed April's cell phone number, and I realized that those 2 rings I heard at headquarters must have gotten through to her after all. "Hello?" I said. "April?"
"Eddie? Oh, my God! Eddie?"
"I'm here, April. Where are you?" Static filled my ears. Through the white noise I could hear her voice, scared, yet still rational and in control. She said something about an apartment building, and then I heard her say Andrew's name. "April," I said. "April, I'm losing you." More static. It roared in my ears. I heard her voice again, and then all hell broke loose. A zombie slammed into the door from the other side, and the whole wall shook. There was a pause, long enough for me to mouth the words, "Oh, shit," and then the door burst open. A burly, thick-armed zombie lumbered through the door, his mouth greasy with blood and caked with little pieces of cloth. I backed up towards the crawlspace as I wrestled my gun out of the holster. He was almost on top of me before I got a shot off. There were 4 more in the hallway moving towards me. A soft orange light was coming into the building through 3 windows along the left-hand wall, and in the muted light they looked like gray ghosts. They shambled toward me, and I ran at them, twisting one way and then the other, dodging around each one in turn, and kept running all the way to the corner. There were more hidden in the shadows, blocking me from a very narrow staircase. The one closest to me was looking the other way, and I grabbed his already shredded shirt and used him as a shield as I pushed my way through the others. I hit the top of the stairs and had to stop. There was a zombie about 2/3 of the way up the stairs, and it was too narrow to go around him. I fired once and sent him sliding down the steps on his back. It wasn't a clean headshot, but it was enough to buy me some time to jump over him and make it to the foot of the stairs. I landed hard and turned the corner, right into the open arms of a huge zombie. He was a wall of meat. He grabbed me with one arm and pushed me against the wall. I tried to squeeze by him, but he bit down hard on my shoulder. Luckily, all he got was a mouthful of the shoulder strap on my bulletproof vest. We wrestled in a clumsy dance. I managed to get a hand under his chin and forced his head back. I brought my gun up with my other hand and shot him just above the ear. Gore went all over the wall behind him. The zombie I had knocked down the stairs was getting up, and there were others about to come down the stairs behind him. I took off running through an open doorway, through another small and very narrow room with a time clock on the wall, and then through a door that led outside. Breathing in the night air, I took stock of where I was. From what I could tell, I was on the opposite side of the building from the loading docks where Marcus and I had seen that huge crowd. But the side I was on didn't look much better. There was a large crowd at both corners of the building. I turned to my right and tried to flank most of them with the best sprint I could muster. They grabbed at me and tried to latch on. I could feel their hands on me, but I pushed and dodged and just plowed through until I broke out of the alleyway and onto a dark and broken street. There was no street sign, no way to tell where I was. Downtown was burning off to my left, and I knew that was west of my position, but that wasn't much of a help. Even if the streets had been marked, I wouldn't have known one from the other. They all looked the same to me. I was completely lost. I knew I had to find a car. Without that, I didn't stand a snowball's chance of making it home. Halfway down the street, I could see 2 zombies coming out of the shattered front doors of a convenience store. As I watched them cross the parking lot, my breath formed thick clouds in front of me. I had been so wrapped up in the stress of escaping the warehouse and trying not to think about Marcus that I had forgotten how cold it was outside. The 2 zombies were walking toward me, but they were still too far away for me to tell if they had seen me or not. Another group of about 7 or so was milling around in front of a small 2-story white brick building about 50 yards away. South of me there were several large Section 8 apartment buildings, and while I couldn't see any movement around them, I knew there would be more zombies there. North, south, and west were all closed to me. Once again I was forced to go east, so I gathered myself up and started off at a trot. There were zombies moving through the darkness on the other side of the empty lot, not far from where I was. I saw a man against the white doors of a half-burned refrigerator, and then I saw more zombies coming out of the rubble near him. With each passing moment their numbers grew, like ants coming up from a hive, until there were knots of them so thick in places they spanned the whole street. I didn't even bother to pull my gun. There were so many of them it would have been futile to waste the ammunition. I looked for a way out and found it around the corner of a wrecked apartment building on the other side of the empty lot. There were gaping holes in the walls, and when a small group of zombies moved towards me, they made a gap so that I could see all the way through the building. Beyond them it looked clear. I ran for the opening and came out on a wet, unlined street. There was a drainage ditch at the end of the block, and I ran there. I ended up in the bushes at the base of the slope, knee-deep in filthy brown water, with ropey vines laced with thorns biting into my face and arms. But I didn't stop moving. I made the other side and scrambled up it on my hands and knees. I was covered in mud when I came over the side, and as soon as I stopped moving, the cold returned with a bite. A huge field of wet grass stretched out in front of me. Off to my left, I could see the firelight from downtown, and as it caught the water on the ground, it made the grass sparkle like a sea of jewels. The grass sloped gradually upward, and the crest of the hill was dominated by a line of dark elms. I walked up to the elms, hoping to stay under the cover of the trees, while I went north, paralleling the drainage ditch. But what I saw instead was a road packed with a slowly shambling crowd of the infected. I ran back into the elms and headed north. A fast mover came at me through the trees, moving just as fast as I was. I tried to change direction on him, but he was on me before I could get out of the way. He tried to tackle me, but I kept my feet and managed to push him down to his knees. I lit him up with my pistol, but he was moving too fast for me to get a clean shot. My first shot hit him in the chin. My second and third shots grazed his cheek and ear. I used my last 2 bullets to put him down for good. Then I ran through the trees until I hit pavement again. It was a small, unlined road, and on the other side of that was a small white church, dark at the windows, and square as a country barn. The zombies came out of the woods on both sides of it, and there were even more behind me. There weren't any more fast movers, but there were a lot of the slow ones. I was completely surrounded. I was freezing, too, wet all the way up to my waist. I looked for a hole to run through, but there wasn't one. I was trapped. I holstered my weapon and pulled out my baton. Slowly, deliberately, I searched the crowd for my first target. "I love you, April," I whispered, and said a little prayer that it wasn't going to be my goodbye to her. "I love you, Andrew." A zombie in a black shirt and ball cap closed on me. His teeth were slick with blood, poking through flaps of shredded skin where his lips had once been. I drew the baton back, and I was timing the stroke when the shot rang out. The zombie slumped to the ground without a sound. There was a bullet hole in the side of his head that looked like a black flower. I turned, stunned, toward the shot. 4 black men with rifles were standing on the front steps of the church. One of them waved at me to hurry up, while the others sent a volley of bullets buzzing in the air around me. Chapter 28. I ran for the porch, bullets whistling past my head. The men on the porch were knocking down zombies all around me, giving me a clear shot right up to the door. I hit the steps at a full sprint, and the man who was waving at me caught me and pulled me over to the door. "I got him, Simon," he yelled to one of the other men. "Let's go." A big guy in his early 20s was down on one knee at the leading edge of the porch, firing through the rails. He glanced back over his shoulder and gave me a hard look. "There's too many of them out here to leave around," he said to the one who had grabbed me. "I ain't staying out here," my guy said. "We got him, now let's go." "Get going if you're going," the one named Simon said, and then he pointed at me with his chin. "Give the cop your gun if you're going." The first man hesitated. "Get going," Simon barked at him. "Hey, cop, you know how to shoot one of those things?" "Yeah," I said, and took the rifle from the first man. "I got it. How much ammo you got?" "A whole damn church full," Simon said. The first man hesitated, but I pushed him back gently towards the door and told him it was okay. "Are there more of you inside?" I asked. He nodded. "Go inside." He slipped inside the church without a word. There was a green metal ammunition box on the porch behind where he had been standing, filled to the top with loaded magazines for the rifles. I looked at the rifle in my hands and read Remington on the barrel. There was no shoulder harness and no scope, and the action still had clumps of packing grease at the corners. I ejected the magazine, checked it, then stuffed it back in. The others started firing. "Come on, damn it," Simon said to me. "Fucking help us out here." I looked across the yard at the zombies closing in on us. The parking lot went right up to the front walk and then continued on around to the right side of the building. A white rail fence separated the parking lot from the road, and about 100 feet or so beyond that was the line of black elms I had just run through. The zombies were coming in from all sides now. "How many of them are there?" Simon asked me, his voice just a notch or two away from an animal's growl. "A couple hundred at least," I said, taking a post to his left. "A lot more than this." An older man standing off to Simon's right threw some magazines at my feet, and then went back to firing. The three of them were unorganized. They shot at whatever crossed their path without thinking about maximizing their coverage, and a few of the zombies got in too close. I walked down the length of the porch railing, firing at the ones who got through. I put 4 down in short order, and then made my way back to the center where the three of them were firing. I grabbed one of the men and pointed him toward the parking lot. "Focus on those over there," I said. Then I grabbed the other guy and told him to get the ones coming from around back on the left side. Simon and I focused on the ones coming out of the elms. Marcus once told me that I couldn't shoot my way out of a wet paper bag. He meant with a pistol. With a rifle, I was a completely different kind of shooter. I learned to shoot a rifle when I was a kid, deer hunting with Dad up in Minnesota, and it always felt like a perfect fit in my hands. Once I had the stock seated against my shoulder, it was a massacre. I went through magazines in a hurry. The infected were falling all over the parking lot, and soon it was thick with their corpses. I even started knocking them down on the other side of the fence, while they were still out in the street. The acrid smell of gun smoke filled up the porch, but I still kept on firing. I was hitting targets on both sides of the porch, and didn't stop until the box of magazines was almost empty. I didn't even notice the others had stopped shooting. When I finally stopped shooting, the yard and the street and the parking lot were stacked deep with bodies. A few zombies were still on their feet and moving slowly toward us, but the crowd had thinned down considerably. "Get her," Simon said to the man at my left, pointing at a young girl of maybe 13 who was dragging her useless left leg toward the porch. Simon loaded up another magazine and shot the last 4 zombies still walking the yard. "Anybody got movement?" he asked, scanning the yard over the sights of his rifle. "They's done on this side," said the man watching the parking lot. "Over here, too," said the other man. "Good." He swept a pile of brass off the porch with his toe. "You shoot real good," he said to me, but it wasn't exactly a compliment the way he said it. More like an accusation. I could sense his hostility. The way he stared at me was more than just posturing. There was real hatred there. Not the kind of hatred one man has for another, but the kind of hatred men feel for symbols, for forces that control their lives and keep them down. I watched his eyes, very much aware of the guns we all held and the unspoken something filling up the air around us. I knew what he was doing. It was a gangbanger's game, to see if I would flinch. On the street, it's a way of establishing dominance. Once somebody makes eye contact, they hold it and won't look away. If you're a cop and you look away first, you're in trouble, because they know they own you. I lowered my shoulders slightly and got ready for whatever was coming next. He stood square, trying to intimidate me. He was a good 4 inches taller than me, with a wide, flat nose and a couple of good-sized gaps in his teeth. His flannel jacket made him look bulkier than he probably was, but I'd say he still had at least 50 pounds on me. The other 2 men didn't get it. I knew what the stare meant, the rules of the game, but even I didn't know why we were doing it. Had he really bailed me out just to do this? The moment dragged out uncomfortably, both of us waiting for the